Hi, welcome to SLU-TV. My name is Egypt Dunn. Today I have with me best-selling author, photographer, and blogger Stanton. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Egypt.
So what inspired you to begin Humans of New York in New York City compared to any other city, especially since you're from Georgia?
Right. Well, I was actually living in Chicago at the time I started Humans of New York, and the decision was a very practical one. I didn't have a car, and I was doing portraits of people at the time. And I arrived in New York City, and there were people everywhere. There were so many people when I pulled in out of Lincoln Tunnel that I couldn't even see the sidewalk. And not only that, but the diversity of people in New York City is unlike anywhere in the world. It is the first stop for everybody, for not everybody, for a lot of people who are coming to the United States. It's the first place they land, and a lot of people stay. There are blocks in Brooklyn that probably have somebody from nearly every country in the world. So if you're going to tell the stories of people, if you're going to document people, you'd be hard pressed to find a better place to do it than New York City.
I agree. I love New York. How do you get these strangers to open up and tell their stories?
I just ask, it's like one of the things that has been so interesting for me is when I started doing Humans of New York, I was terrified to even ask somebody if I could take their photograph. I didn't even know if somebody would let me take their picture. And now, 6 years later, when I approach somebody, I almost expect that within a few minutes we'll be talking about things that are very personal to them that they might not have told anybody else. And what I've learned is that when you ask with curiosity and authenticity, there's very few things that people won't tell you if you're coming from an authentic place.
So we know Humans of New York started in New York, but what was the transition, if any, from going to places like Sudan or Jerusalem? Like, what was the transition like? Or was there a transition?
It was just, I guess when I started traveling, my whole plan was just to stop random people on the streets of these different countries that I went to and go through the exact same process that I go through on the streets of New York. Main difference being that I was doing the work through an interpreter, which is a big learning thing, is something I had to get used to, because so much about Humans of New York is not just asking the right questions, but making the person feel comfortable with your energy. And so when I was overseas, I learned that more important than the proficiency of my interpreter was their personality. I needed a person who was going to be the conduit through which I asked my questions. I needed a person with warmth that cared about people, that if somebody started crying, they were going to put their hands on their shoulder, because I realized that that kind of energy is what gets people to open up, as opposed to saying the right things.
Great. With the success of Humans of New York, you're able to go to these different countries, but you've also inspired people in many cities to start their own Humans of series. How does that feel to be able to inspire people to capture people in their own areas?
It's great. I was just talking with one of the people I was eating dinner with about how, they did a project at her high school. And I think, the fact that there are so many of these projects all over the world, and some of them are very good, I think it's absolutely wonderful for Humans of New York, because so many people, I think, first discover Humans of New York by starting to follow a project that's closer to them, or in their high school or in their town or in their state. And so I think it's not only allowed other people to document their communities, but it's also allowed a lot of people to discover my work that might not have done so otherwise.
Okay. What do you believe was the special component that made Humans of New York and all these different series so popular?
It's the storytelling, because for the longest time I was just taking pictures of people, for the longest time, and Humans of New York was growing, but it wasn't, exploding like it eventually did. And the one thing that really caused it to get traction, the thing that really started to grow it and expand it, was when I started learning the stories of the people I was stopping in the street. And I think what that reflects is an interest that people around the world have in strangers, an interest that people have in the people they pass by on the street, but an interest that they might not be able to exercise because they're afraid of approaching strangers. So once I had approached so many strangers that I was no longer afraid of it, I sort of took that step for other people. I got over that fear, I approached people, and I learned the stories so that other people could learn about the people around them without having to approach strangers themselves.
Okay. And one last question. What advice would you give us college students who might have these big abstract dreams or ideas? What we have to sacrifice to accomplish them like you did?
Right. Well, you're going to steal the fireworks from my speech because this is a major thing I talk about when I give the speech. But my best advice is you can't wait for the perfect idea before you really start pursuing what you want to do. Because the humans of New York that eventually became successful looks nothing like the humans of New York that I started 6 years ago. Nothing at all like it. It wasn't a flash of inspiration I had that I conceived and then I executed. It was me going out and photographing every single day, like it was my job, and evolving and innovating it one small increment at a time until it became what it was going to be. So I always say you can't wait for perfect. You have to start before you're ready.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.